The way I thought about it, and another movie that did this a lot better, was The Matrix. Because if you remember, in The Matrix, there's a lot of scenes where they're fighting, and then it'll cut to, Morpheus and Neo, and they're like kind of, eyes are just blinking around, Hey everybody, welcome to KM Reviews. I am Niddleman. Today I'm bringing you a spoiler-free review for the movie Assassin's Creed starring Michael Fassbender. This movie is the next movie in a line of video game movies that are trying really hard to be good. Just like the way comic book movies used to be complete shit, and now they're awesome. We had Mortal Kombat back in the day, which is fucking badass, and it will always have a place in my heart. But ever since then, video game movies have just been crap. Now recently they're like, what's the next big thing? Video game movies. They got good stories in them, so maybe we can utilize these things. Is this movie going to be the one that just hits us and makes us go, yes, we want video game movies? The answer is absolutely no. This movie was really disappointing, actually. And it was not a complete shitbox, but I was just so disappointed because it was such a good storyline for a movie. It had so much potential. I liked the video games that I don't know what happened. This is honestly, it just felt like such a small, encompassing movie, and it should have been a big epic, the kind of storyline they got going on. And so I'm not sure if maybe they got to the editing room and just kept editing out shit to the point that it was just a short, crappy movie. And they're like, well, we got to release something, so here you go. I don't know. But it was not a complete shitbox. There are pros to this movie, but there's a lot more cons. So let me go over the pros with you first, and then I'll go over the cons, okay? As far as the pros go, the actors. I really liked Michael Fassbender. I really liked Marion Cotillard. There's a few other actors that pop up in this movie that you will recognize, and they all do a good job. They seem believable. I think Michael Fassbender was the perfect choice for this character. He looks like a badass in his wardrobe, and that's another pro to me is the costuming, at least in the 1400s. The wardrobes were all really cool. I liked the assassins' outfits, their little tattoos, all that stuff. It looked really cool. Also, the action in the 1400s was also really cool. The way they had those like blades that come up right here, and it felt very fluid. It seemed like the choreography was very well done. I also liked like the chase scenes. It just felt like the video game, the way they're like hopping along and climbing up the walls and stuff like that. It was just like the game, which I thought was really cool. I also kind of liked the mythology that they started to dive into. And the whole idea how it's kind of like the Matrix, how you can plug into this thing and access all this information. I liked the idea that basically our DNA holds all the memories to our ancestors. I thought that was a really neat idea, and you could just like access it if you knew where to look. And it was a neat idea, but they didn't expand upon it very much, and this kind of leads me to my cons. Is one, there's a lot of plot holes, a lot of unexplained things. And the thing is that the first 2/3 of this movie I thought were really good, but the last third got really kind of confusing. And the more you think about it, especially after you leave the theater, you're like, but if that happened, that would mean, but then that doesn't make sense. And the more you think about it, the more the movie doesn't make sense, and it just kind of upsets you. Because initially when I left, I was like, that wasn't so bad. But then now that I've marinated on it for like a day, I'm like, this movie really just kind of pisses me off now because they've ruined so much potential. Another negative I have is some of the film work in this movie, because while the action scenes and the fight scenes themselves are kind of cool, the way they film it makes it look really disorienting and really shaky and really choppy, and it was really distracting. It's like if they would have just held on some of those shots or done a slow pan or something, it would have been really cool. But instead what they do, and they do way too much of it, is they cut between, and you've probably heard this on other reviews too, is they cut between the actual action and Michael Fassbender in this machine kind of fighting nothing. And at first, I actually kind of liked that. I was like, oh, that's cool. You can kind of see what they see, because as he's in this machine, it actually projects what he sees so everyone else can see it too. And so they're watching him fight, and it was kind of cool. But then they kept doing it, and they kept doing it. And the way I thought about it, and another movie that did this a lot better, was The Matrix. Because if you remember, in The Matrix, there's a lot of scenes where they're fighting, and then it'll cut to, Morpheus and Neo, and they're like kind of, eyes are just blinking around, But they only did that a few times, just enough to remind you that they were in the Matrix. But they didn't overemphasize it. Could you imagine if they kept cutting during every single fight scene with Agent Smith and Neo to him just blinking around and then just kept doing that like every 5 seconds? That would have been so fucking annoying. That's kind of what this movie is like as they blink back and forth. So that was really distracting, and I think they liked the idea of doing that at first, and someone in the editing room liked it too much, so that was a disappointment. But honestly, the biggest disappointment for me with this movie was simply the scope of the movie, because basically the entire movie is only like, I felt like it was only like an hour and a half long, and pretty much the whole thing took place in like one kind of warehouse area. You know what I mean? Like, it really wasn't that big of a scope. He only goes into the machine a couple times and not for very long. And when he's outside of the machine, there's kind of this boringness to it. Not to mention the characters themselves, there's no character development. And you feel like they wanted to put character development in there because there's all these cool characters in there, but you don't know anything about them, nothing. And so they're there and they're like talking to Michael Fassbender, like, you need to protect the apple, you better not fuck us over. But you have no idea what they're, like, who they are. Like, why are you talking to me like that? And who are you? And it seems like they have these cool backgrounds and they're kind of badass fighters themselves. And you don't know anything about them. It would have been really cool to explore who these people were in their past lives or who their ancestors were. Why do they know so much about this? Obviously, they've kind of been in this world a little while. It would have just, they just needed to expand upon this movie more. Show more of the mythology. Make it like another hour long, but focus on that other hour in the 1400s to explain more of the mythology, how these characters connect to each other, more about how this whole thing is that being an assassin is in their blood. There's kind of like literally like being an assassin is in their blood, and like again, I can't get too much into what the plot holes are without spoiling stuff, but there's just so much thrown into you at the end of the movie that you're like, you don't understand why characters are doing what they're doing, especially Marion Cotillard. Sorry if I pronounced her name wrong, but her character is pretty straightforward the first 2/3 of the movie. In the last third of the movie, she's doing things where I can't tell whose side she's on. I can't really tell what is her motivation or what her thoughts are. They reveal certain things and you're like, so does that mean this or does that mean that? And you can't tell. And her facial expressions don't do enough to tell us. And so I was just left kind of confused at the end. Like, so what does that mean? And it wasn't done very well. And there's so many fucking plot holes. Like, I want to just tell you what all the plot holes are, but this is a spoiler-free review, so I can't do that. Just know there's a lot of fucking plot holes. So at the end of the day, guys, I have to give this movie blue balls. There's so much potential there, and it just leaves you completely unsatisfied. So guys, out of all the video games out there, what do you want to see turned into a video game movie? And I'm not talking about some bullshit like Tetris or any of that, but really, legitimately, what do you think? Personally, I don't think video games have the ability to be condensed into a 2-hour story. I think they need to be like a mini-series on Netflix or something. That way you can really evolve the storylines and they could be really good. That's just my opinion though. What do you think? Comment below and let me know. Also remember, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, pretty much everything at Niddleman. And if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to get updated reviews every single week if you can handle it. Go.